Hello, Hannah, Conrad, welcome to the studio. I'll start by asking you to please introduce yourselves. Who are you and what do you do?
I'm Hannah Ferguson. I'm the founder and CEO of Cheek Media, which is an independent news commentary platform primarily through Instagram.
Let me dial up my intro just to match that. My name's Conrad. I am the founder and currently self-appointed CEO of Punters Politics, making politics simple for the everyday punter. And I make Instagrams, TikToks, YouTubes, and I'm on LinkedIn too.
And you have that title? I think you should add it.
I'll add it.
The bio is like overloaded. So, Conrad, we've chatted before, and what you've told me is that what you do is closer to what a talkback radio host might do than what a journalist does. Can you talk me through what your thinking is there?
I think Talkback has just moved to YouTube. I think, if I'm to be brutally honest, I'm just a millennial Alan Jones railing on YouTube to a bunch of blokes and on TikToks and things like that, because I think the media landscape hasn't changed as much as we think it has. I think it's just changing shape and changing formats. And at least one of them, at least YouTube, when you look at the American political space, people are looking for commentary. And rather than an old bloke on AM yelling, I think it's morphed into a similar sort of authentic dialogue one way with people listening. And I think it's not much has changed.
I prefer you to Alan Jones for so many reasons.
It's the hairline, I know.
No. But I think that's a great example, because I often say Talkback is a great comparison too, because I think when these criticisms come up of content creators in new media and this conversation, it's often like, well, you're not a journalist. And it's like, well, the thing is, we've never claimed to be. I say commentator. I'm not a journalist. I've never studied journalism. My background is the law. We've been put in a position where people are looking to trust someone's opinion and to bounce off it, not necessarily to take it as gospel. I think what we both offer is actually to look and say, no, you don't need to agree with me. I'm not asking for you to completely align either. I'm asking for some interesting debate outside of the mainstream, which isn't offering that to us anymore as a public.
And so why did you choose to go down the route of social media content about news and politics rather than, let's say, journalism in its traditional form?
I started off studying a double in law and journalism, and the journalism subjects killed me. I got the worst marks because 30% of my grade was 3 tweets, and I thought, how ridiculous, which is ironic looking at the work I do now, which is mostly really good tweets, I think. But I realised quite quickly after leaving university, and I worked in the trade union movement, so I had a skill set particularly talking to 50-year-old men in the Northern Territory and Queensland about the work they do as electricians and what their rights were in the workplace. And I realized that I had the ability to talk to the everyday person about complicated issues. And when I took that to Instagram, which is speaking directly to young people about the issues and the politics that affects their lives, it quickly grew, because the time I started was late 2020, COVID lockdown, early 2021, when the Me Too movement really took hold in Australia, leading into the election where Scott Morrison was our Prime Minister. And what I found was people just wanted a left-wing alternative to commentate on the issues that Murdoch was failing to.
Yeah. And Conrad, for you, why did you start making commentary type content?
I think I was just one of many frustrated punters looking at the current media landscape, which we're told we should watch the news, we're told it's important, and then people disengage, and then we're shamed for it. Oh, why aren't you paying attention? And I think I discovered firsthand that the reason we're not paying attention is because what we're told to pay attention to is a bunch of BS, and it's a waste of time. It's distracting you with stuff that does not matter and does not change your life. And so when I came across good journalism that was pointing out the thing that boosted my Instagram, pointing out how much we give our gas away for free, these bludgers don't pay tax. When I started focusing on that and talking about that, I quickly discovered that punters do care. We are engaged. It's just we need to be engaged. We need to be talking about the right stuff. And I think I just kind of brought that voice, was like, this is not as complicated as you think. If the rules are rigged, bloody change them. And I'm trying to occupy that space that doesn't get caught up in the technocratic arguments about what's viable, what's not. We as a population, we employ politicians to do their bloody job on our behalf. Why should I have to look over their shoulder? So I'm trying to kind of bridge that gap between some good journalism that exists, communicating, probably like Hannah does a lot, to everyday punters, and then kind of saying it's okay that you think this system is rigged and you think that media is a joke. I get it, because they have set us up for a bit of failure here. And so, but just try and reignite a little bit of engagement to the issue issues that matter.
And you're both creating content on politics and news that is social media first. You're posting on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, where on these platforms, people who have hundreds of thousands of followers like you both have are usually considered influencers. Would either of you say you're part of that group? Are you an influencer for news?
I wouldn't consider myself an influencer. I think the term influencer is problematic for a number of reasons. I think that the first one is it's quite selectively used to talk about young women. And I think that's because often it's sort of a basket we're all thrown into, and the idea is to then distract the members of the public that aren't maybe social media aware or literate and say these are people to be frightened of because they're superficial, they're fake, and they're not to be believed, and they're not genuine. The word influencer, I think, does apply to some people in the space, and to have influence is a good thing, but the way it's wielded is important. And I think that there's so many connotations that mean that the kind of application of that language by the media, especially in the last couple of months around the election, has been so problematic, and just sought to say these people are full of it, basically.
And fear?
Yeah, it's definitely a pejorative, a dismissive term to just try and make everyone write off what someone might be saying or what someone might be critiquing. And I don't know. I wouldn't think of myself as an influencer. I think most people think an influencer just is someone with followers. And I think that's okay. I think that's fine. I think we are seeing this interesting backlash from legacy media, seeing the success of, or the lack of control over reach. Now they can't, they used to have all the mechanisms by which they would communicate to the public, and now that's kind of breaking down. And so I feel like we're just entering a new kind of hybrid warfare between the disruptors coming up and speaking directly to people and the legacy. And influencer is one of those terms that, you know, I got a few friends who are influencers. And
Yeah,
that's
same.
okay.
Absolutely. And I think like in certain fields, we do have influence. I understand the use of the word, but I also think to what you've just said, like the way that sort of the mainstream media has attempted this election cycle to adapt to the digital environment, but kind of flopped. Like I'm seeing a lot of different outlets trying to have a greater digital presence, but it still has this really artificial, serious kind of presentation. And that's what people aren't trusting. They want to see us get behind an iPhone. Not, you don't use an iPhone, sorry, got to correct myself there. But they like the fact that I have a tiny microphone that I hold and I just say, here's what the news is, here's what the facts are, and here's what I think about them. They don't want to see a reporter in a suit standing using the most deadpan expression with no character whatsoever. People want to be sort of humanized, and that's, I think, what we're both trying to do.
And I want to talk about this objectivity, authenticity kind of paradox a little bit later. I also want to talk about whether major parties and traditional media outlets are effectively engaging with young people, as you've hinted at already. But I'd like to go back to you bringing up reach, and I want to hear about your audiences. Can you tell me who is listening to you and what they care about?
Yeah, so I'm currently reaching 3 million Australians each month, and the demographic that I reach predominantly is women aged 25 to 37. That's the biggest group that I have. But surprisingly, I have more over 65 followers than under 24.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so it's quite
Don't wreck this election for us, Jensen.
But it's interesting because people have this presumption that because I'm a 26-year-old woman that my following will be predominantly 18-year-olds. And it's not. It's actually older people that are also on Instagram trying to engage with their children and their grandchildren that are looking outside the mainstream media and the major parties as well. So I think that this kind of framing that I'm just a silly young woman with an opinion is ironic, given that some of my biggest donors, the people that actually like subscribe to my platform, that buy my vibrator, which is one of the mechanisms through which I make money, are actually people over the age of 60, men and women.
And for you?
It's mostly millennial blokes is the top one. I haven't checked my stats, but probably a couple mil reach on across platforms. Mostly millennial blokes, and then it tapers off sort of either side. And I think my audience is uniquely, at least the punters that see me in the street, just people that aren't normally engaged in politics. They're too busy. They've got other stuff to do. They're the kind of people that are like, yeah, nah, but who cares? That's largely a lot of my audience.
In the lead up to the federal election campaign, I did a call out to Gen Z and millennial readers of The Guardian, asking them what their major stresses are right now. We had almost 1,000 responses in around 2 days, and overwhelmingly, of course, the major issues that they raised were cost of living, housing, healthcare. There's a worry about social cohesion, a rise in the far right, discontent about inaction on climate change, Palestine. Trump was brought up a lot. What do your audiences care about?
It's exactly that. I think that we would have some difference because I think there's quite a gender divide in our following. My audience would skew more towards issues like reproductive rights, Palestine, Donald Trump, the gender divide in politics, the manosphere and misogyny online, far-right extremism. But I think that social cohesion piece is massive. But again, cost of living and climate action are two resounding facts for young people as to what we want to see more from the major parties on.
Mine's probably the exact opposite. It's very economically driven. Like a lot of my language, the way I talk about stuff is literally just how much did it cost? How much are we getting scammed? And I think the issues that I'm always focusing on in the audience really resonates most with are the things that are very tangible, very practical. So it's under the heading of cost of living, but it also goes into the number one issue that people that to this day gets the most views and most engagement is the idea that we're getting ripped from our natural resources. Economy struggling, small businesses struggling, everything, housing, we can't get it. We feel poorer than ever. And I think that is kind of what I see underpinning a lot of this cost of living stuff. So very practical things like why is housing a ripoff? Why is our corporate or supermarket duopoly just ratcheting up prices? Like for me and the way I'm communicating, it seems very systemic. Like cost of living is just the symptom, but the issues that people are engaging with are like, this system is rigged and broken and we need to do something about it.
Even when we're talking about this, it's really funny because I assumed just as much about Punters Politics audience that it's really about cost of living and the way the average punter is being ripped off. But what's interesting is I think that we want to find these gender splits and these cultural divides, but actually what it comes back to is people feel like they're being lied to about the moral fibre of the people in leadership positions, whether it's lying about economic change in the gas industry and that sort of thing, or whether it's being sort of lied to in the way that they believe politicians are doing performative action on social issues. Both are, we are sick of this shiny veneer that you're putting forward. We can see straight through it.
And when you are curating your content and choosing what you cover, are you engaging with requests or resounding comments from your audience? Or do you have a different process of choosing what you decide to platform on your pages?
I think a lot of the time I'll put question boxes out just to get a better understanding of the sort of political literacy levels that I have in my audience. Because one of the things we can get pretty complacent around is I spend all day reading about this stuff and it can be pretty jarring for people if I'm only posting about high-level housing policy when they don't know what the Liberal Party is in the first place. So I'm not really necessarily taking specific feedback on like, this is the post I want you to make, but I will try and gauge what people's levels are in terms of awareness and how to vote sort of information. So I know if I need to do more work on, well, this is what a Senate voting card looks like versus talking specifically about an issue.
Yeah.
I just vibe it, eh? so I one of my mates was telling me, he's like, you know, the Australian passport is $412 Australian dollars. I'm like, what a rip. And I just felt so outraged. I'm like, there's a real incoming on this. And that one got
that was one of your biggest videos. And I remember looking through your profile at the time going, this is shocking to me because I thought it was a great video, but it constantly surprises me what has the most lift off.
Yeah.
Often I'll go, okay, this video I think will get this many views, and I'm always wrong.
Yeah. It's very hard to know. And I think my rule of thumb is if I'm outraged about this is the way to lead to. And all I try and do is go, this is a rip. How do I give people some sense of relativity as to why it's a rip? And so that's why my initial one, which was Norway laughing at us because of our teeny, itty bitty, tiny little royalties we get. And so that's like the relative reference that can help people understand.
You mentioned before a slight gender split in what your audiences care about. We know that social media algorithms are creating echo chambers, silos of idea and opinion. Do you have any concerns about your content falling into algorithms, being part of something that generates those echo chambers and silos?
Absolutely. But I also think the criticism I constantly come up against from within my audience speaks to the reality of people can disagree with me and continue following me too. Yeah. I have a couple of followers who are men over the age of 50 who are my most dedicated.
A couple.
No. But my couple that are my favorite. When I say this, sorry, I have lots. Actually, like disproportionately, men over the age of 50 like the most likely to subscribe or like give me like a $50 sort of like buy you a cup of coffee things, obviously a few cups of coffee. Not for long though if inflation keeps going, but it's interesting to see that they're the most likely to endorse or like buy an anti-Peter Dutton shirt that I sell. But when we're talking about the gender splits that I experience, one of the things that Conrad and I talk about a lot is actually the fact that my content sits within like a self-identifying left-wing progressive space. And there's a huge issue there where much of the left will sort of have major criticism backlash towards me for not being left enough or sort of being too left. Like I get it from both sides and you can't win. Yeah. And that's because I'm one person creating content that's reaching millions of people. So of course that's going to come. I think the level of reach I'm experiencing, of course it's going towards a progressive audience, but I'll tell you the death threats I get from men and sexual violence threats speak to the fact that it is reaching outside the bubble. So I do recognize the algorithm I'm contributing to, and that often the highest performing posts are quote unquote the most inflammatory too. And that is a difficult thing to reckon with because you have to provide meaning and value to people and substance in your content. But then the easiest 5-second clips that I make are often the ones that outperform and reach millions. And that's quite a difficult thing for me to personally struggle with when creating content and working out how much time to spend on different issues too. But it's the reality of social media. I want that system to be regulated. It shouldn't fall to me as an individual to be responsible.
Yeah, I think people like Hannah and I and creators and people online are being scapegoated by another corporate oligarchy. Because I make editorial decisions. I go, that outrages me, I'm going to do that. Hannah makes editorial decisions. The Guardian makes editorial decisions. And you can be held accountable for that, especially The Guardian, right? You do something wrong, there's a regulator, you're in trouble because you're a broadcaster. And what's happening now, the broadcasters today are algorithms. They're massive US-owned tech oligarchs that are now broadcasting. They've outsourced their job to an algorithm that is deciding what people see. This is the thing creating echo chambers. This is the thing subtly shifting our behavior to turn us towards the issues they want us to focus on, what's more profitable for them, depress us a little bit, we'll buy more stuff. This is what's going on.
So we are halfway through the 2025 federal election campaign. How do you think the major parties are engaging with young people?
Oh, terribly as expected.
I thought better than expected.
Really?
I mean, Albo and Abby Chatfield.
In terms of media performance, I mean, one half is doing better. And of course, I'm going to give it to Albo that he's actually bothering to go outside the echo chamber.
I mean, P. Dutt's poor performance. Where's he on the Punters Pod? Invitation still stands.
I've sent 3 emails to Dutton. I know I've sold 5,000 shirts anti him with his name on it, but the invitation's been there. Right? No, I think Albo's $1 billion mental health announcement was one of the biggest call outs to young people. I do think Labor's $10 billion investment in housing is significantly better on the issue of addressing affordable supply, which will benefit 100,000 first home buyers at least. Again, I don't think it adequately addresses the supply issue or the property investors like Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese, who both have a larger property portfolio than the average Australian, who will directly benefit from not changing the laws around negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount. Of course, I do think Labor's doing better. I think the Greens are doing best at reaching young people. I think some indies are trying really hard as well.
Yeah, I'm a little bit impressed at the openness from a lot of politicians to engage in the podcaster stand sphere of, I think the whole Trump and Kamala Harris Rogan incident made them think, well, let's not make the same mistake Kamala made, not going on Rogan. And I think that's a good thing because I think they're recognizing that shift.
But also, it's really interesting given the point you just made about Trump and Kamala and the podcasting campaigns and the media environment, because the opportunity that's different in Australia is we have a system of preferential voting. We are never going to end up in the same division, the tribal politics of the US, because what people like us are doing is saying to the average person, actually, you have a much better option here. If you understand the voting system in this country, you understand the power that your individual vote has. And I think that's part of the power of what we do too, is people see the action and the impact in real time.
So you're saying that the kind of podcaster, commentator, PR run that a politician might go on is cutting through better than, let's say, the reels that they're posting to Instagram.
If anyone's seen the reels that they're posting to Instagram, you'll understand the tough watch that it is.
Hannah, you've interviewed the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, and Greens leader, Adam Bandt. How do you prepare for those interviews and what do you aim to get out of them?
So I think with both interviews, and again, the format of our podcast is slightly different. Cheek and Big Small Talk are separate entities. But Big Small Talk, the idea is that we do the light and the shade of the news. The idea is to reach a younger audience of women specifically who have never engaged politics before. So half of it is about pop culture and social issues and discussing like Katy Perry going to space last week. And then I come in with, the budget. And the idea is that you're changing gears.
So much fun.
No, I know. The joke is always like, when you're just falling asleep with Hannah, Sarah brings it back. And I struggle with that in my own personal way. But the idea is that we joke that it's like giving the dogs medicine with peanut butter, that you're getting the news that you need, 3 biggest stories of the week with the social issues that matter and you want to have a debate about with your friends over a wine, right? And so when interviewing Albo, it also was that, when interviewing Albo and Adam Bandt, the idea was to apply the same sort of logic. So I would interview them for the first half about specific policy issues, whether it be, their action or inaction on climate change, cost of living, taxing billionaires, all of these issues. And then Sarah would come in for the second half and interview them about why they entered politics and interview them about the manosphere, about Elon Musk, about Trump, about more cultural questions around gender divides, and throw in some fun questions to humanize them. Because I think that part of the problem here is that when we make Canberra an exclusive elitist bubble, we also fail to actually dig into the human behind it and say what drives you, what motivates you. And yes, that might be a media trained answer, but I think asking it in the first place when so much of mainstream journalism is a 10-second gotcha soundbite provides people with an opportunity to listen and hear from them in an extended, different way than is allowed on social media right now too. So the prep was honestly not that heavy. I knew what my audience wanted to hear, and I also knew I had about 7 to 8 questions with each of them. So I went for the big issues that I knew mattered to our audience, and that's the balance between the economic issues and the social issues that a lot of women care about.
I've developed a loose format that that I follow, and unfortunately for both of us, politicians are still way too afraid to hit the 2.5 hour Rogan sort of vulnerable. You can't hide for that long. There is a benefit to that, and the podcast format does do that. They're still way too afraid to do that. So in this world where, okay, they're coming halfway, they're in this new sphere, I'm trying to bring the who's funding you, where you get your money from, and what's your voting record.
It's also interesting that criticism that comes to influencers in quotations that you're not offering a 7:30 Lee Sales interview. And to that I say, I'm not claiming to be anything other than trying to have a conversation across the table that sounds like a person-to-person discussion.
Yeah.
And of course, we're going to get that media-trained answer. But it's interesting. I expected the criticism to be of my Albo interview. You didn't interject enough. You didn't attack him. You didn't kind of bulldog him. I only went back at him on a couple of issues, some blatant shit I got from him about minority government that I thought was just not good enough. And actually, the comments were all positive, and they were all basically, for once, a journalist didn't just interject for the sake of it. You let someone speak and have a go at answering more broadly. And I got 2 to 3 minutes on policy that I had never understood before. And yes, often it is a crock of shit from these politicians. I completely agree. But actually hearing them list what they've done for the last 3 years to a lot of voters who have no idea can be helpful. And they can hear the training. You cannot underestimate people's ability to sniff out problems and lies and disingenuous behavior. That's why they follow us, because they believe us and they trust us. And it's so funny, even coming in here, I'm people think of us as brands, but every time I see you, or I hope every time you see me, it's that is the person I see on social media. Yeah. That is the reality of who they are. They are not putting it on. And that's why we have followings. And sitting across from Albanese or Adam Bant, it allows people to contrast how genuine or authentic I'm trying to be against them. And I think it's pretty obvious.
I want to ask about criticism that creators in your space are receiving from a few sides of the place. There were dismissive comments by politicians and media organisations at your inclusion in the budget lockup this year. For example, the Liberal Party had Abby Chatfield's interviews with Albanese and Bant investigated by the AEC as political endorsement. And she responded to that saying there is a moral panic about, quote, influencers, using her words, talking politics. And I've spoken to a researcher who agrees, and she says that this moral panic emerges when it's young people talking politics to other young people. What do you think about the skepticism around what you do?
I actually thought about the AAC investigation of Abby Chatfield that it was unfair to look at her interview with the leaders and see if that, and I think it's a fair question to ask if it was paid. Obviously, I think money transfer is something that should be looked at, but it clearly wasn't. It was clearly not creatively directed by the politicians either. What I think is fair criticism is collaboratively posting with politicians, because that feels too close for comfort for me. And I had both the Prime Minister and leader of the Greens request to make collaborative posts, and I said no for that reason. It didn't feel comfortable. I do agree, though, on the whole, that the sort of criticism and the probe of Abby Chatfield has been unfair. And I also think it's really interesting to see the mainstream media condemn us and say that and lots of coalition politicians specifically, these politicians that get in the comment section and try to suggest to people that I am somehow the insidious beast here are completely wrong. And it pisses me off to no end. Wear your sponsors on your shirt, because I disclose everything. We are so concerned about getting things right, about being transparent, about being authentic, and these people hide behind huge corporate donors, and they have the sort of gall to have a go at me.
I think you nailed it. I think it is a uniquely Australian problem. We are far more Karen than we are Ned Kelly. We love to dob on someone else. We like to pick on somebody else. But the really sinister thing is we love to overregulate the everyday little punter, whilst the massive corporation, God forbid I go for a walk in the bush or ride my mountain bike somewhere where I'm not supposed to. Oh, that's bad. I'm in trouble. Rangers after me for some little thing, bicycle, no helmet, whatever it is. Rio Tinto blow up bloody Australia's Stonehenge. Oops-a-daisy. And I think bringing that whole thing to this media sphere, all of a sudden we got Rupert Murdoch hand-wringing about where our money comes from and what's going on. So to be honest, I welcome it. There should be transparency around where people get their money from and what, commentary looks like when you're a broadcasting organisation with a following. But don't bloody look at me in my bedroom.
And you said just before that you rejected the offer of a collaboration post with Albo or Bant. Would either of you endorse a political campaign? What are your thoughts on the kind of line there between your commentary and endorsing a party or a person?
I think one of the differences between us is that I'm very actively anti-Peter Dutton and the coalition. I'm not interested in endorsing a particular candidate because my messaging to my followers is, I don't live in your electorate. I don't know who's up on your ballot, right? So I don't want to say you have to vote one, this Indie or this Greens or Labor or whatever. I'm interested in having conversations across the progressive spectrum and driving the Labor Party further to the left. And I see that through better action on climate, tax reform, etc., right? So when I'm talking to my followers, I'm not saying one to this candidate, and I've actually rejected probably 10 opportunities to speak at particular campaign events for candidates because it doesn't really feel comfortable to me to be seen with a particular person. I do actively speak about the power of the independent movement, noting that they're not one homogenous group, that's the nature of being an independent, and the power of movements like the Greens. I have been a Labor Party member, I am a current Greens member, and I've worked and volunteered for independents too. So I've volunteered for all three, but my alignment and personal voting habits are actually quite different to all of that too. So I'm actively anti-coalition, I'm incredibly critical of both major parties, and I swing left. And I'm quite transparent about that, but I would never tell someone what to put on their ballot.
The whole reason I entered the political conversation was to try and provide an alternative to partisan beauty pageant politics. That's they're with them, or they're a Greens, they're that. If that's your argument, they're left, they're Greens, they're Labor, they're Liberal. If that's your argument, that's complete rubbish. I'm trying to see if I can nudge the conversation in towards what policy do you want? One, what do you care about? What policy outcomes do you want and what policies can you have? And then I don't care who you vote for. I'm just saying to my audience, vote, just check their voting record because they say some nice things and their voting record doesn't back it up. So I think when it comes to the broader discussion, endorse, don't endorse, celebrity endorsements, I think the US is the best example. Bloody Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris. Fat lot of good that did. If Taylor Swift can't nudge an election, what do you bloody think I'm going to do?
What if Taylor Swift hadn't endorsed Kamala Harris?
I mean, maybe. But celebrities have been endorsing or not endorsing forever, and it seems to, thankfully, not change the needle as much. So I think some platforms can choose to endorse. Friendly Geordies is openly loving Labor, and that's cool. And I like watching his stuff and seeing what he thinks Labor's done well. That's fantastic. He's a creator that does that. I'm just going, listen, I'll criticize whoever's in government because I want these policy outcomes. And people can they'll try and label you and box you into some separate boxes. And that's just the same old distraction, beauty pageant, rubbish politics that get us into the mess where we vote for personalities and colours and not bloody policy. Because politicians and political parties change. The Labor Albo is a completely different beast to Bill Shorten, right? The Greens have picked up half Bill Shorten's policies. So I'm just trying to create a new type of political conversation that I hope punters can get on board with.
And authenticity has come up through a lot of your answers to different questions. That seems like the common thread here in what you are doing. Is this something that you think traditional news media is lacking? And is that why audiences are looking to listen to you?
It's almost a funny question. It's almost a funny question when you look at our followings and you look at our engagement. The only reason we exist right now is because of their failure to retain relevance, to adapt to new media, to a new landscape, to a new audience of people that are questioning them, and their refusal to adapt and instead to attack us. And people can recognise that in Australia we have one of the most concentrated media landscapes in the world. It is dangerous, is to put it lightly. We are currently existing in a disinformation propaganda machine that is leaning far right. And there are a lot of people who are seeing through the spin and waking up to it, and we want to help them drag other people in their life out of that too. The reason that I think, even just the last question that you asked about like voting and what do we or don't we tell people, I think even our ability to just say upfront, like, this is my alignment, this is my view. I'm not trying to dictate to people what they feel or do. I'm just trying to guide them honestly with the subjective opinion that I bring to the table and say, yeah, of course, this is my upbringing. This is why I think the way I do. This is how I've come to realize that. And this is what I think, debate me. And I actually just wish that the media landscape in this country would wake up to that power and try to take on some of it in their own approach, because it's working. And instead, they're just fighting us at every step of the way.
Hannah, you brought up subjectivity. What do you think is the role of traditional journalism and the content and commentary you are producing in the one media landscape? Can the two work together? What is the role of each?
Well, I think it's actually really important to recognise the great independent journalism in Australia that exists. There's outlets like Michael West, like Crikey, like The Guardian, who I subscribe to, who I love the work of, and that people like us piggyback off. Like, it's important to acknowledge that I look at great articles from them and go, this is something worth talking about, and they have a smaller readership because they need, subscriptions, donations to survive. And the least that I can do is cite my source and say, go and read this article by this incredible journalist that's gone and done the digging that the mainstream media, the traditional legacy media, the Murdoch media refuse to do. But it's actually quite difficult to find, and it's often inaccessible because it has to be behind a paywall for them to survive. But I do think that both can coexist and they need to work together well. But I think there's a lot of people that are working towards the betterment of Australian society, and it isn't as dire as we may have presented this entire episode to. I think there's some great people out there that I've met in the course of this too.
Yeah, you're right. There's still good journalism happening. You're right, that I am looking at. And I think media as a thing and as an institution has been struggling for decades, and I think we'll struggle until we figure out a solution to the fact that what's most profitable is not what's most beneficial, and that's where we're at. Like, you can make more money just reporting on maths and regurgitating comments on Instagram social media posts.
I'm with you. It crushes my spirit every single day. What gets the most clicks?
Yes. Well, that's what's profitable, right? But that's not media. So I'm saying, hey, that's fine. Do it. Be profitable. But you're not bloody news. Don't pretend to be news. So I think there has to be it's a massive problem we need to come together and solve and work out, because, I always want to cite my sources and support the journalists that are helping me communicate. Because I think there is a mutual benefit, whereas if I can promote their stuff, good. If I can help translate some boring academic research that some institute has done, and I can help punters understand that, that's great. But I do see a big problem in the misalignment of incentive structures.
Like, at the end of the day, a lot of what we do is work to communicate these complex ideas and great pieces and amplify them to audiences they would never otherwise reach. And all I hope is that they're okay with that too.
Well, they got no choice. They're about to go out of business.
This is too real. It's time to end the podcast. Thank you guys very much for joining me.